Thank you so much for joining. Today's webinar will begin momentarily. We're currently waiting for additional attendees to join. Again, thank you so much for joining. Thank you for your patience. We'll be beginning momentarily. Thank you all so much for joining today. We will be beginning momentarily. Today, we will be experiencing a webinar called Making Your Wishes Known, Living Your Values and Planning Ahead. Before we get started today, please note that today's webinar is going to be recorded. And please also note that everyone is in view-only mode, which means your audio and video functions are disabled, and neither will appear in the recording. We will have a formal question and answer session at the end of the webinar. And to ask a question of one of today's panelists, please type your question in the Q&A box on the screen and click send. Please note you can check send anonymously if you do not want your name attached to your question. And we'll be answering questions during the end of the webinar. So today our moderator will be Wendy Miner, who's been at Compassion and Choices for just over 3 years. She's the Community Engagement Associate and also works on the Maryland and DC campaigns. Our special guest today is Ottamissiah Missy Moore. Missy is a resident of Washington, DC, and her nursing experience and knowledge spans over 30 years. She's currently a member of Compassion and Choices African American Leadership Council, and she's been the past president of the National Federation of Licensed Practical Nurses and a lifetime member of the Black Nurses Association. She has served on the board of the District of Columbia State Board of Nursing and is actually a former recipient of the Nurse of the Year award sponsored by the National Black Nurses of Greater Washington. Thank you so much, Missy. I'll now pass it on to Wendy to begin our discussion today.
Thank you so much, Brandy, for that introduction. And I am so honored to be with all of you all today, representing Compassion and Choices and the Community Engagement Department. Compassion and Choices is the nation's oldest, largest, and most active nonprofit working to improve care, expand options, and empower everyone to chart their end-of-life journey. Next slide, please. Topics and goals we will cover during this webinar. Missy Moore will share her personal story with us regarding her son, Demetrius. We will also identify issues, end-of-life issues, and Compassion and Choices resources created to address them. And our goal for this webinar is to educate, empower, and prepare you to be the best advocate for yourself and for your loved ones. And I would just like to repeat that again, because it's so powerful: to educate, empower, and prepare you to be the best advocate for yourself and loved ones. I would like to begin by sharing a short video focused on the importance of end-of-life planning. The video features some of Compassion and Choices staff and advocates.
At Compassion and Choices, we have worked with different community groups and community leaders to start having these conversations before a time of crisis, so that we are sort of desensitizing ourselves to the subject of death, and taking sort of the fear aspect away from it and the mystery around dying, and really planning for it.
We plan all the time for everything. You know, we plan for birthdays, we plan for weddings, we plan just because. And I think that we need to plan for your end of life.
There are many, many psychological, very positive effects when it comes to planning. Because planning means what? That you have the mind and the will to be able to look into the future. Planning means to be able to look at your goals, where you have the ultimate decision, but you do have the opinions and the support of those around you.
Sometimes it get hard, because, you're bumping heads when you start hitting with people's belief systems.
I have noticed that with Blacks that we have a tendency of not to want to talk about death or not even think about death in any way. And so I realize with my members, their knowledge of even making preparation for death is very low, but I tend to add it into my pastoring them. I always have. But as a people, I think we tend to not want to even think about death.
My cousins or relatives used to tell me all the time, man, don't go to the doctor, because when we go to the doctor, man, when they come back from the doctor, they usually die. But they don't understand that what happened was that because you didn't go to the doctor, all of this stuff was going on in your body, and now you at stage 4, and now the doctor says there's nothing I can do. So now I think what we have to do is prepare people and educate people.
Will you have all the answers if that person's in the emergency room or the person has passed? No, but at least you have some kind of roadmap before if you have that conversation, So I think that in a perfect world, to make it run smoother, have the conversation now.
We have to continue to educate, push, and make people really understand and see. The best thing to do is to sit down and have a conversation.
It's a tough subject. But when you plan, things run smoother. It won't be perfect, but it'll be smoother.
We have created a lot of tools and resources that really can help foster that conversation and really break down those specific issues that you face at end of life.
So preparation for anything is good. You need to be prepared. So you get prepared by getting the information. That's the value of compassionate choice.
We found that just by even getting the information out there, that we can probably impact some of those disparities, because people just aren't aware that they have access to some of these options.
Now, without further ado, I would like to welcome Missy Moore. Hi, Missy. We are so thankful to have you with us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And I'm really honored to be able to talk about my unbelievable son, Demetrius, and our experience. In 2017, I actually was away at a nursing conference, and I received a text from my son, Demetrius. He said, "Mom, I'm in the hospital, and I have something going on with my lungs." So when I returned to DC the next day, when I got there, he said, "Mom, they said that I have cancer and that I have advanced disease." And I just talked to him. I said, "Well, how do you feel about it?" And he was like, "Well, I'm not really sure." And that was hurtful, because I think that he was still in a lot of shock. And you know what? I was in a lot of shock too. I said, "Well, you know what? I'm going to go get us some lunch and I'm going to come back." And I went and got us some lunch. And when I came back, the advanced directives booklet was by his bedside. And I sat down and we were eating lunch, and I said, Demetrius, mom wants to talk to you. I want to know how you want to live out the rest of your life. And he says, I don't understand what you mean. And I said, well, do you want to stay in the hospital? Do you want to have more surgery? All of those types of things. He says, well, mom, I really haven't thought about it. I said, well, I want you to think about how you want to live out the rest of your life. I said, because I want to be able to do exactly what you want me to do.
Right.
Now, not having known this, my son had told his friends, all of his friends, he says, if something happens to me, I want to have a Viking funeral. But I did not know this. So needless to say, he's being discharged home, and he really didn't tell me any of his wishes. He told his brother. And I think that's because he felt maybe he felt his brother could handle it more than I could. And my youngest son told me, he says, Mom, he doesn't want anything heroic done. He doesn't think that he wants visitors. And we ordered hospice. We had hospice care for him. And hospice came the very next day. Everything was set up. Nurses came. He had all of his medical equipment. Everything came just so that we could support him. The sad part of this story is that we found out that my son had cancer October the 1st, and he passed away October the 24th. So my question to him was timely, because if I said, well, I'm just going to wait and ask him, I don't know what his death would have looked like.
Right.
But because I asked him the question, he was able to tell his brother what it was that he wanted. Now, the important thing, one of the great things about his death was that his friends, he had mentioned to them that he wanted a Viking funeral. So what they did was we had his memorial service. And after his memorial service, the next day, his friends went to the park. They built a Viking ship. They set it on fire and put it in the Potomac to honor him, because they knew that he wanted a Viking funeral. And I thought that was just so kind of them because just doing that to honor my son. I thought it was, that's really, really good friends. And you have to really know my son. He was a comedian. He was he was a scholar. He was an artist. He was a writer. He was an unbelievable young man, and he had such good friends. But his end of life went better than most, because he had told us what he wanted. I had hospice to support him. So when he said to his brother, I want chocolate chip cookies in the middle of the night, we were making chocolate chip cookies in the middle of the night instead of trying to figure out how we were going to get care or what we needed to do in an emergency. Right. It really set us up to be able to care for him in the way that he wanted to be cared for. And I'm grateful for that. I'm really grateful for that. Next slide for me, please. You're welcome. One of the things that I wanted to be a takeaway from this is to really talk about what are some of the end of life options that you have, because I think a lot of time people, they're asking you to make a decision and you may not necessarily know what it is. So I just want to put in plain language, because when you see the paper or when people start to talk to you about the end of life, people automatically get nervous. They say, am I getting ready to die? But actually, we want to put, we want to put the cart in front of the horse this time. We want to talk to you when you are well. We want to talk to you when you can make your own decisions, to find out some of the things that you may want if you have an illness. And we're going to take all of these individually and talk about them. So in regards to palliative care is specialized for specialized medical treatment for people with serious illnesses. The care is focused on the relief of symptoms and also the stresses of the illness, not only for the patient, but for the family, because I want us to really remember that whatever the patient is going through, the family is going through it as well. The goal of palliative care is to improve the quality of life for the patient and the family. And the care is provided with a team approach. So it may be a physician, a nurse practitioner, a nurse, it may be a physical therapist, a respiratory therapist. All of these people work together to help manage the symptoms in the patient. Residents can, the good thing about palliative care is that the patient can always get curative treatment if they so choose. For instance, some people may have some type of cancer. Some of them may choose that they don't want any treatment, but if you have palliative care, you you can get curative treatment. Sarah told me, don't forget spiritual care. Absolutely, I do not need to forget spiritual care because we are taking care of the whole patient. Medical social workers are in palliative care. That absolutely is true. Palliative care can be provided at any stage of the illness. So you could be diagnosed today and go into palliative care today. That one of the most important things is that it's patient-centered and it's patient-driven. So that means that you must talk to the patient to find out how they want to be treated, what is the most important to them, and how it's going to be managed. And we have to think more about that because we can make a lot of plans, but if the patient isn't ready to do it or doesn't want to do it, then that isn't helpful to them. You can go to the next slide. Now, in regards to hospice care, hospice is not a place, hospice is a philosophy. And what it says is the hospice philosophy is that we have a team approach to caring for someone who is close to the end of their life. This is a benefit, a Medicare benefit that's covered at 100%. And usually what they're looking at is that if a person follows their disease progression, that you aren't expecting them to live more than 6 months. What I do want to also say is that some people live longer than 6 months. And part of that has to do with once hospice starts to manage their symptoms, their pain, they have a tendency to live a little bit longer. But with hospice services, of course, you get volunteers, physicians, spiritual counselors, social workers, bereavement counselors, home health aides, therapists, music therapy, animal therapy, aromatherapy, massages, a lot of different things that will support the patient and the family. Of course, the care is provided in an intra-professional approach, and it's 4 levels of hospice. This is important to know because it kind of helps you to understand how sick the patient is and whether or not they can still get care. So if routine hospice care is provided in the home, the nurse can visit 2 to 3 times a week. They'll also have a home health aide, they'll have a social worker, a lot of different things. And they come to the house to manage it. Also, another level of care is continuous care. When you have a patient that has symptoms that they're having a hard time managing, the patient is having a hard time, or the family, then what hospice will do is have a provider come and stay 24 hours until the symptoms are managed. They also will be evaluated every 24 hours to ensure that the symptoms are being managed well and when the 24-hour service can be discontinued. There's also another level of care is inpatient hospice. Inpatient hospice is when a patient goes to a hospice facility, and that is used for symptom management. So if a patient has symptoms that they're unable to manage at home, they may not necessarily want to have continuous care, they would go to an inpatient hospice setting. They would be there until their symptoms are managed, and then they would go back home. And then the last level of care is respite. And respite is used when the family or the caregivers need a rest or have something that they have to take care of. An example is I had a family one time where the caregiver had to have surgery. So they had respite come in to care for the patient so that the caregiver could have surgery. And those are the 4 levels of hospice: routine, continuous care, inpatient, and respite. The goal of hospice is to improve the quality of life for the patient and the family, and also to support the dying process, to help people, get their things in order, whatever those things are. Sometimes it's broken relationship, sometimes it's spirituality, sometimes it's forgiveness, sometimes it's just oneness with God. It could be a lot of different things that people are trying to put together before they pass away. This wonderful gentleman is our Wendy's dad.
Thank you, Missy. Missy, I am so glad that you shared the information about hospice, because as you know, my family, we had to make that decision, and we ended up having hospice in home care for my dad. And my family was really reluctant. Me nor my family were really supportive of hospice. And we just thought it was a place that you just go and die. But sorry.
That's okay. You know what?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
It hurts. It hurts.
Yeah, oh my God, yeah. But after having the experience with the support that was provided for my father, from the doctors, the nurses, the aides, everybody that came in there, my family and I just changed our opinion about hospice, and it helped my dad, and it helped us to make a peaceful transition. It was difficult, but I with hospice, it just really made it easier for us to go through. So thank you for sharing that, because education is powerful, right? And we didn't know anything about it until we had to face it ourselves. And we went out there to get more information about hospice. So thank you.
Well, no, thank you for sharing the story about your dad, and also, letting people know that you were nervous about hospice. I wasn't nervous about hospice because I've been doing hospice and taking care of dying people for the last 27 years. So when it seemed like it was very natural for me, but it was still my son. But for you, that's still a very powerful story, because your family didn't have any experience with hospice at all.
Right.
And you trusted it enough so that you could care for your dad and for you as well. So that's an important and powerful piece as well.
Yeah. Thank you. And we made the right decision. So thank you.
Good. That's right. So what do palliative care and hospice have in common? It's selected by the patient and the family. They have the choice. The patient and the family has the choice. As a matter of fact, if you want to do a hospice or palliative care consultation, you don't need a physician. You can call any hospice or any palliative care organization and say, I'd like to get a consultation. They will have you come in. They may call your primary care physician to find out information about you, ask you why you think you might need it. And you know what, if you don't need it, at least if you call, they'll have all of the information for you so that you've had the conversation about it. The goal is to improve the quality of life, both of them, palliative care and hospice. The patient and the family are seen as one unit. That's important because if you remember, I told you whatever the patient is going through, the family or the caregivers are going through as well. It's patient-centered and patient-driven. It's patient-centered. That means whatever the patient wants, whatever the patient is driven to do or not do is how the care is done. And I'm not saying that that's easy. I'm just saying that it is. You know, I had taken care of a gentleman one time, and he was close to the end of life. And he was like, you know, Missy, the only thing that I really want to do is go to my mom's house and get into the jacuzzi. And I said, well, gosh, I don't know. Maybe it's something I might be able to do. And one day I just called his mother up and said, listen, I have a plan for him. And this is something that he wants to do. Can you help me? And it took us all day to do it. All of his family was involved. They brought a wheelchair. They brought a van. We got him in the car. We got him to his mom's. He got into the jacuzzi. You know, people were calling all over like, Missy, what are you doing? I said, just let me do it. This is something that he really wants to do. And he made it home and he passed away a couple of days later. That's what hospice is all about. That's, you know, last wishes, really caring for people. Now, the hospice eligibility indicators. Sometimes, you know, you may not get a diagnosis. People may not come out and say, or your physician or provider may not come out and say, you know what, I don't think you have long, or because my son's doctor didn't tell me that. When I asked him about hospice for my son, he says, I'm not going to talk to you about that today. Of course, you know, that didn't go over well because I'm a hospice nurse and I knew what I was seeing. But let's talk about the eligibility indicators. Frequent trips to the emergency room or to the hospital, in and out, symptoms not managed, in and out, frequent infections, weight loss, and you're not sure what the weight loss is from, changes in your intake, problems eating or swallowing or drinking, frequent medication changes. Every time they go to the emergency room or to the doctor or to the hospital, the medicines are being changed around. It's not really working for them. Frequent falls, a change in mental status, frequent skin breakdowns, blood sugar readings that are through the roof or extremely low, having to go to the lab for blood all the time, pain issues and shortness of breath. Also, some other symptoms that need to be managed at the end of life and in palliative care. Pain or dyspnea is shortness of breath, anxiety, nausea and vomiting, constipation, agitation, congestion, all of these things. If you have someone who's constantly having all of these things, it's a good time to go to your provider and say, you know what, I'm concerned about A, B, C, and D. We've been to the hospital 4 times in the last 4 months. You know, is it something that we should know? Do we need to talk about some other types of care? Is it some other things that we need to put in place? These are the questions that we have to ask the physician. And also we have to ask the person who's sick.
Right.
You know what? We need to ask them, you know, do you want to go to the hospital? Because sometimes they'll be very sick and they'll say, I just don't want to go to the hospital again. You know, and we have to think about what are we going to do with that and how we're going to keep the person's wishes. This is one of the best books I've ever encountered. It's the Compassion and Choices End of Life Decisions book. And in this book, it really lays out in very plain language things that you may want done and things that you may not want done. and things that you may be unsure of. And the reason why it's important is because at least if you open the book and start to look at the questions, then at least you can start to think about it, so that when they ask you, what would you like to do? You'll know exactly what it is and what it isn't, and whether or not you think it's something that you might want. So we have a quick poll for you. And I think that, I'm not sure how we answered a poll. Oh, here we go. The poll should pop up and it says, have you talked to your family about your end of life wishes? While everybody's taking the poll, I just want to talk a little bit. Before my son passed away, my mother passed away right before my son did. And my mother lived in Philadelphia. I live in Washington, D.C. And of course, her siblings, they all lived in Philadelphia as well. So when they went to identify my mom, I said, oh gosh, you know what? I wish we would have known soon. I would have known sooner, because mom was an organ donor, and my uncle was very upset. He said, I'm not giving out, and I wouldn't have gave him any of your mother's organs. I said, well, uncle, mom was an organ donor. So when it was time for us to make my mom's arrangements, I had a driver's license. And I said, see, uncle, look, on mom's driver's license, mom is a registered organ donor. And my uncle was like, well, I didn't know anything about it. So, talking to your family is important.
Yeah.
My mom had talked to me about being an organ donor. But I lived in DC, but she didn't talk to her brother or her sister about being an organ donor. So we had we have 55% of the people said yes, that they have talked to their family about the end of life. 11% said no, and then 34% said they need to talk some more. And you know what? Talking a little more is not a bad thing. At least you started the conversation, because the more that you talk about it, the easier it gets. And you know what? Just like we can make our wishes known when we go to a restaurant, we can make our wishes known about how we want to live out the rest of our life.
Right.
We need to make it kind of normalize the conversation. So I just want to talk about what some of the end of life decisions are. An advance directive is a written statement of the person's wishes regarding medical treatment, often including a living will, made to ensure that those wishes are carried out should the person become unable to communicate them to the doctor. That's true. The advance directives will include a living will, and I just want us to remember that is when the person is living, but if the person passes away, the living will is null and void. Also, for the advance directives, it's important to have in place before someone becomes ill. Right now, in the time of COVID, is absolutely a great time that, now why we should put things in place. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is, as a nurse, when you go into a facility, of course, they're asking you, if something was to happen, would you want to be resuscitated? Would you want to be on a ventilator? And families are getting very upset. But with COVID, people are becoming very ill very quickly. And before they know it, they may need to be resuscitated, and they may need to be on a ventilator. So they're asking what it is that you may want, so that in case of an emergency, they'll know whether or not you want it or you don't want it. The good thing about advanced directives is that it can be changed at any time. You can change it. You can change your mind anytime, but it's important that you give a copy of it to your healthcare providers. A lot of people fill it out and put it in the safety deposit box, or put it in their strong box or their kitchen drawer, and it never gets to the right people. And that would be your family members who you've hopefully discussed it with, and to your care providers. do not resuscitate, DNR, do not resuscitate, is a medical order making clear an individual's request that no measure be taken to resuscitate them if their heart stops or they stop breathing. This is, we see so much television and there's so many medical shows and things like that. But we have to take more time to explain it to people so that they really understand what it means. Asking them, if your heart stops, would you like to get, would you like to be shocked, or would you like to get additional medication, or would you like to be on a ventilator? And some new verbiage that they have now is AND, which is allow a natural death. And more people understand that. Would you like to have heroics done, or would you like to allow a natural death? And I actually like that verbiage because I feel that the patients understand, they understand that type of language. A living will is a document that expresses a person's end of life preference if they become unable to speak for themselves. The most or the post, this is the medical, or in some states it's called the medical orders of life-sustaining treatment, or in some states it's called the physician's order of life-sustaining treatment. The forms are available in multiple states, and the order is part of advanced healthcare planning and is prepared by a physician. It's often printed on brightly colored paper and placed on a refrigerator so that it can be easily found during an emergency. I know in Maryland, out here where we live, if you have one, they ask you to put it on the refrigerator, or they ask you to attach it to the back of the front door so that when the EMTs come, they know that not to do any heroics to the patient. VSED stands for voluntary stopping, eating, and drinking, a legal right for any individual who wishes to shorten their dying process by refusing nourishment orally or through a tube. This is a right that individuals have. We will see in some cases that people will voluntarily stop eating or drinking. And a lot of times it has to do with patient comfort. It has to do with tumor volume, nausea and vomiting. It just isn't comfortable. It just isn't comfortable for them. So of course that part is they will stop eating and drinking. And part of what it is that our role is to support the patient in what it is that they want to do. And they stop eating and drinking, and a lot of times, the family will say, well, they're not eating and drinking, let's take them to the hospital because they need to get IV fluids. But we also need to keep in mind that the other parts of their advanced directives may say otherwise, that they don't want to have that done either. Mm-hmm. So we have to look at everything that they want done and that they don't want done. Yeah. The great thing about Compassionate Choices is that they have an end-of-life information center and a consultation program. These resources are free. So if you go to the Compassionate Choices website, you can go there and make an appointment, and you can get a free consultation to help you understand the end-of-life choices in each state. And this is big because not only as for the people that live in each state, but also for care providers, because a lot of us work in multiple states. A lot of us have licenses that can be used across multiple states. So this end of life planning really, once you start to have the conversation, then you start to look for more information so that you can really put together what you need. The COVID, the Compassionate Choices website has the COVID-19 toolkit, and it has a lot of information in there, understanding what your options are, also telehealth, also COVID-19 advanced care planning, dying at the age of a pandemic, and then the impact on underserved communities. You know, if you people who contracted COVID um, became sick very quickly, very quickly. So it's this information is here for you to look at and to make some decisions about what you may want to do if you have to go to the hospital because of COVID. Now, this is one of my favorite things. It's called the Diagnosis Decoder, and this is on the Compassionate Choices website. So you go into the decoder and you put your diagnosis in, and then once you put the diagnosis in, then it will generate a list of questions for you to ask your physician based on your diagnosis. And that is how we empower our consumers. That's how we empower the patients. Because you know what, if it's a new diagnosis, you don't know. And if you don't understand it, you still don't know. But this helps you to really ask questions so that you can think about the decisions that you want to make. And some dementia is a big one. We have a dementia toolkit, cancer, but any illness, at any illness, at any stage, it is absolutely appropriate to do advanced care planning. Dementia values and priority toolkits. This is a great information there to help you understand what the priorities are for someone with dementia. It also talks about the levels of dementia, and also how you can help individuals in their different stages of dementia. Oh, this is one of my favorites too. This is, I give this out a lot. This is the patient medical notebook. And this notebook is really helpful for patients and families, especially if they have a new diagnosis or something, or they have so many things that they're trying to manage. This notebook can go with them from doctor's appointment to doctor's appointment. They can write down their questions that they have, or they may have the questions in there from the diagnosis decoder, and they can take it with them. It'll have they can put their pharmacy numbers, the radiology number, all of the things in one book and take it with them, because it helps to empower them to help them feel like they really know what's going on with them. One of the things that I hear a lot of patients say is, I'm still trying to figure out what's going on, and putting all of the information in one place for them to take with them from doctor to doctor, because it's very few patients now that we see that only see one physician. They may see one or 4 or 9. So this helps to keep everything in place for them, and helps their family members too, because if they go by themselves, or if they go with a friend and the friend just sits in the lobby, when they get back, they may not even be able to tell you all of the things that the doctor said while they were in there. So this is my unbelievable son and his sense of humor. The one of the things that I loved about him was that he always loved to wear a tuxedo, and and he loved Frank Sinatra, and the song that he loved to sing was "Luck Be a Lady Tonight." But I just want to thank you all for just listening to me, and helping me to honor my son. That's part of why I do this. My son had a really good death, and that's something else, because death is really hard. But because I knew what he wanted, I had a lot of time to be his mom and make good memories with him, watching TV and eating cookies and laughing, and not really having to worry about who was going to help me with the medical pieces. But thank you all so much for honoring, for listening to me tonight, and also for honoring my Demetris. Thank you. So Compassion and Choices is having our signature event. It's called Purpose, Power, and Promise. And I am a team leader. Yay! I've invited, I think, like 60 people to get on. And part of our signature event is to meet people like myself who have great stories, who are talking about how people make their choices at the end of life, how we support each other, how we can normalize a conversation about end of life, and just what it means to empower people to be their own advocates. We have the information here for City of Hope, and I'm a proud graduate from City of Hope. Almost all of my end of life and hospice training I got from City of Hope and Elnick, and they will be having an end of life symposium in December, and I think it's in Las Vegas. So you can go. It is in Las Vegas.
And it's in person or virtual.
I think I want to go to Vegas, but anyway, but if you really want to know about, hospice and end of life and what it means and how important it is, this would be a great place to go, because City of Hope really are an outstanding group of end of life professionals. I am absolutely open for any questions.
And Missy, I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you so much for your presentation. Thank you for joining us. And this was such a powerful and needed conversation that we.
Thank you, Wendy. And I
needed.
appreciate you sharing about your dad, too. I mean, you can't help but cry sometimes, but I don't have the sadness that I had, because, hospice really helped me have a good death for Demetris. So when I cry, it's really joyful that I had such precious, precious time with him.
Right. So Missy, one of the questions Helen asked, with COVID, if you do not want a ventilator, is there a way to administer palliative care without the patient suffering?
There is a way to administer palliative care without the patient suffering. Now, if you decide that it all depends on the physician. But if you don't want to get a ventilator, they may offer the patient high flow oxygen or BiPAP along with medications to decrease the symptoms.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Tim asks, how can one be guaranteed that their living will be honored at the time of critical need? Is there a recommended way to ensure that the living will or advance directives are complied with?
I think the main way for it is, number one, to ensure that you've given your information and made your needs known to a person that's going to follow your wishes. That's one of the really important pieces. If you give it to someone and you just say, I want you to do this, and they aren't in agreement with it, they'll be like, oh, I don't know if I want to do this. That's why you have to have the conversation. The other piece of it is that to ensure that your healthcare providers have your information and that it is a part of your medical record. Because if someone decides otherwise, the physician can always go to the record and say, this is the most up-to-date advanced directive, and this is not what the patient wants.
Right.
Someone said you can have a healthcare, you need a healthcare proxy. You can have a healthcare proxy. You can't have a healthcare proxy when you're not able to make your own decisions.
Thank you, Missy. All the questions are good, but I want, Kathleen asked a question: how expensive is hospice care?
Ooh, hospice care is very, very expensive. And believe it or not, the majority of the expense is when the patient starts the service, because all of the things are provided at that time. The hospital bed, the nurse, the medications, oxygen, all of those things cost the most amount of money. But once the patient is in the program, it actually evens out a little bit, because I believe that Medicare gives the hospices an amount per day to care for the patient. In regards to what the patient pays, Medicare is a benefit that pays for hospice at 100% for your terminal illness. So for instance, if you have cancer and you were admitted to, and you were placed into hospice for your cancer diagnosis, any medication that had to do with the symptoms and management that you needed to care for you, Medicare would cover at 100%.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to try to ask a couple more questions.
Okay.
Can you have hospice care at home if you have no family members?
You can have hospice care at home if you do not have family members. Arrangements are made. You can have hospice care if you don't have a home. I know that I have taken care of a gentleman that has lived in his car, and I've taken care of someone that's lived in a homeless shelter. But if you live alone, what they will do, as long as you're allowed, as long as you have someone that's a responsible party that they will check in with you, or check on you, then most hospices will let you stay at home as long as you're safe. As long as you're safe.
Okay, I'm so sorry. Thank you, Missy. I'm so sorry. We have so many good questions, but I have to close it out. And if you would like to include your email in the chat, we will try to get back with you, and because we want all of your questions answered. So please put your email, if you would like, in the chat box. And then we can go on to the next slide.
You want me to put my, when you want me to put my email?
Oh, you could, yeah. You can do that too, Missy. That's great.
Okay, I'll put it in.
Yeah, and then I'm gonna go. So if you would, so here's my slide. If you would like to contact Missy, please email her at, and I'll spell it. It's Ottamissiah, which is OTTAMISSIAH@yahoo.com. If you would like more information on compassion and choices, copies of our wonderful resources, or if you would like us to present at any event, please contact me, Wendy Minor, at wminor@compassionandchoices.org. So after this webinar, there will be a follow-up email that will be sent out with all of the resources that we discussed today. But you can also find those resources along with others at compassionandchoices.org/end-of-life-planning. Next slide. Also, we have an archive of all of our previous webinars. So you can visit, you can see those, and at our website, compassionandchoices.org/webinar series. Also follow us on social, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. And last but not least, Compassion and Choices is funded almost exclusively by individual donors like you. With sufficient resources, we can realize end-of-life choices in every state. Every donation of any amount makes a difference. So please consider making a donation today at compassionandchoices.org/donate. So I hate to say this, but this concludes our webinar. I would like to thank Missy. Thank you so much. We are so grateful to have you. I would like to thank the Compassion and Choices team. And I would like to thank all of you for attending this webinar. Have a wonderful evening and please stay safe. Thank you now. Bye-bye.